worldview ride-along. As Jehovah's Witnesses, we were meant to believe that only Jehovah's Witnesses would survive Armageddon. And that's why it was so important for us to aggressively evangelize, proselytize, because we needed to bring as many people as possible onto the figurative ark with us. That ark being the Jehovah's Witness organization. Now, this didn't appeal to me as a Jehovah's Witness, and I think it doesn't feel right to a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, in a video that I posted a while back in this series, one of the first few videos that I made in the Post Called Worldview series was why I am not a theist. And I made the point that if I was going to be consistent in not liking exclusive salvation for Jehovah's Witnesses, that I had to carry that with me into the way I viewed Christianity. So I couldn't be a theist, or I can't be a theist, because of this idea that only Christians are acceptable to God, only Christians are of the elect, only Christians get to go to heaven, only Christians don't go to hell, however you want to frame it. To be consistent, I couldn't accept that. That's one of the reasons that I'm not a theist. Now, what this is really talking about is religious exclusivism. You can find religious exclusivism to varying degrees in most world religions, at least some denominations of all world religions. But where you see it the most pervasively and really written into the doctrine is Christianity and Islam. Now, there are unorthodox versions of both of these world religions that are not exclusivist. But generally these are viewed as heretical versions of Christianity. And I should say that there are people that are in exclusivist denominations who do not have an exclusivist worldview. They might not accept that aspect of the doctrine. You got to keep in mind that people that aren't Jehovah's Witnesses, that aren't in Bible cults, have a lot more freedom of mind to take what doctrine works for them and throw out what doesn't. And I love that. I applaud that. But generally speaking, the doctrine of Christianity is one of religious exclusivism. And there are a number of verses that one can point to in the New Testament to support this. But probably the biggest one that people talk about is where Jesus says, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." That is a very exclusivist ring to it. That if you don't have the right beliefs about Jesus, you cannot be acceptable to God. About who Jesus was, and about what he did for us in a very literal sense, and who he is to you personally. That if you don't believe certain prescribed things related to those questions, that Jesus is not the way for you, and therefore you cannot get to the Father, you cannot get to heaven, etc., etc. Now, that's not the only interpretation of that verse I feel impelled to point out. I'm going to put a beautiful article in the comments below, written by Marcus Borg, that presents a very different understanding of that verse. That basically we can all be in that way, regardless of what your belief system is. We can all follow the way of the Christ, which is to die to a former course and be reborn. And I think that all former Jehovah's Witnesses know what that's like. But that's not the majority interpretation of that verse. So generally speaking, Christianity is a clear example of religious exclusivism. And again, the same can be said of Islam, though I personally don't know as much about their doctrine or what passages in their holy book they would use to support that. Now, to contrast with religious exclusivism, we have pluralism. And their are a variety of different kinds of pluralism. You could be a pluralist who says that all religions are true. I don't really understand that, because if you're taking a literal interpretation of all these different world religions, they are contradictory, so they can't all be literally true. Or you could take a position that there is truth in all religions. You know, maybe all of these world religions have founders that had achieved a certain kind of enlightenment. You know, they were all ascended masters, or however you want to put it, that had really profound truths to share, and that later on followers of these individuals kind of turned these people into idols and created world religions around them that are deviations from a fundamental truth that existed at the beginning. That kind of appeals to me. It makes a certain amount of sense. I don't think that all the so-called founders of every world religion even literally existed as actual historical people. Like, was Krishna a real person that lived on the earth? Probably not. But I still kind of get it. Like, there's wisdom in the teachings attributed to Krishna. So somebody had to write those words. And so we see all these world religions with wisdom at their core. And in that sense, there is truth in all these world religions. Another kind of pluralism would be just to say all religions are equally false. I fall somewhere between those two, I think. That all there's truth in all religions, and that all religions are equally false. Now, what's interesting, and I think a little bit irritating, is when I have a conversation with a religious exclusivist, and I'm talking, in my case, about fundamentalist Christians that I've had conversations with, and they try to make it sound like I'm just as exclusive as them in my worldview. I mean, I'll make it clear to them that religious exclusivism doesn't appeal to me for these philosophical reasons, and they'll say, but listen to yourself. You have a worldview, therefore you're just as exclusivist as I am. You know, implying that the fact that I believe something, or that I disagree with them and I have a position in this discussion, that therefore I'm an exclusivist, that everybody's an exclusivist, they can't get away from that fact. And I think that they're trying to make my position seem absurd, my position of disliking religious exclusivism, and try to make it seem like, you know, you're already an exclusivist, why not come over to our side? This feels fundamentally dishonest to me. It's obscurantism. It's trying to play fast and loose with language to try to be persuasive. If you're a Christian and you believe that Jesus Christ is the only way, and you have an orthodox understanding of what that means, and you're talking to somebody who is a pluralist of any variety, you are the exclusivist in that conversation. I'm not saying that has to be a bad thing. I'm just saying own it. Be honest about your position and understand the position of the person you're talking to. Now, a word for the non-believers who are watching. If you are the kind of non-believer who is closely identified with the word atheist and are a outspoken anti-theist, and you say things like, we just need to get rid of religion, and all people of faith are idiots, that kind of rhetoric, you are starting to sound exclusivist instead of pluralist. And in a case like that, you don't have as much ground to stand on when a religious exclusivist says you're being exclusive and that you have an ideology. You kind of do. My position is that I don't really care what you believe. I think that there is value to be found in all the wisdom traditions, and that as long as you are not trying to influence public policy And as long as you respect the separation of church and state, and as long as you're not hurting anybody with your beliefs, I really don't have a problem with it. You know, it starts getting a little bit sketchy when we talk about the influence you might be having on your children and teaching them things that aren't true. But I'd rather have a discussion about that than just make a blanket statement that that is wrong or that we need to get rid of all religion. It's far more complicated than that. So those are my thoughts for the day. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What do you think about pluralism? Do you think it's a reasonable position to be a pluralist? Do you think that there is a place for religious exclusivism in our shrinking world as we come in contact with more and more people with differing worldviews? Is religious exclusivism ethical? Let me know what you think. And always remember that there are more things in heaven and earth that are dreamt of in our philosophies.